Start with some serious drama, which has been topping the Netflix streaming charts around the world. Baby Reindeer, of course, loads of you have watched it. We had Richard, who it's all about, on the show a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? And it's opened up the conversation around the complexities of stalking.
Now, sadly, many stalking victims have spoken out about the lack of support offered to them and failings by the police. And our first guest today has now joined other brave women by sharing her terrifying experience in a new ITVX documentary, Stalking: State of Fear.
Stalking has destroyed the life that I used to have. I'm no longer the person that I used to be. I feel frightened that I'm going to be killed or my family are going to be attacked. It never stops.
When you go out, you're always looking over your shoulder, checking who's there, even eating in a restaurant. You want your back to the wall, you want to know where the exits are. If all else fails, there's a baseball bat, which it just makes me feel better knowing it's there.
This is the tracker attached to the inside of the car on my battery. That's no mean feat to be able to attach that, and it certainly wouldn't be done on a whim. It's been thought out, it's been planned.
Well, that documentary, Stalking: State of Fear, is available to stream right now on ITVX. It is extraordinary, isn't it?
It is, and we're joined now by one of the brave women who took part, Dr. Marie Gerval. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for being here today, because I know all of this isn't easy, but I do think it's the way that positives can come out of a terribly negative situation. Can you tell me how you first met your stalker?
Yes, so I work and live in London, and it was lockdown time, and my parents, my elderly parents, had been caught out in Australia, so the house, my family home, was empty. So I would go back and forth and just check on the
And that was up in Manchester, so you're travelling when
Lancashire.
you could between London and Manchester.
And I noticed a few things needed to be done. I found this person on a trader's app, came and did some work, seemed an affable man, quite friendly. About 6 months went by, and I kept, I'd ask him to come and go and do jobs. And sort of at the end of that year, he asked me out for a drink, and I thought, I suppose we were all not in our normal frame of mind during lockdown, and it just, for better or for worse, I agreed to go out and have a drink, and a very short-term relationship, friendship ensued. A few months later, I realised this wasn't quite appropriate, so it called it a day, and it didn't seem to create any problems.
No.
And we stayed in amicable contact. A month later, about 10 months later, I get a message about how he was feeling unwell, depressed, mental health, and being a medical professional, I reached out to. I felt it was my duty to help. I took him to his GP, and I felt quite concerned because he seemed quite low. And during that time, and I think this has possibly all been planned months in advance, but in that period, he phoned me one day and asked if he could borrow one of my cars because his van had broken down. And again, I thought, well, if he's going to miss out on work, this isn't going to help his mental health. And so I agreed, and he took the car. Unbeknownst to me, he'd taken the car, his van hadn't broken down, and he consequently placed a tracker, or got somebody to place a tracker on.
We saw that clip in the documentary and a picture of the tracker on the engine. Now, that's not just any old tracker.
No.
And as you point out, that would have needed help from mechanics or a garage somewhere to work out how to put the tracker on.
Absolutely, yes. So, and interestingly, when the officer first came to speak to me, he seemed very sort of concerned about everything. He acted professionally, diligently, said he took stalking very seriously. But 48 hours later, he came back and he decided he was going to close the case. And at that time, he told me, I phoned the garage, and he gave me the name of the garage, and they've admitted that they put the tracker on. I subsequently phoned that garage, and the garage said, no police officer has phoned here, and we didn't put a tracker on this car. So I never understood why the officer had been dishonest with me. It's taken me 2 years. I've constantly had to ask the police, would you give me some information about about my crime.
Yeah.
Who put the tracker on the car? And finally, I was told freedom of GDPR. I wasn't allowed to have that information. I've finally been given that information. And the company who put the tracker on the car obviously didn't know why, didn't know, but told me that in order for them to actually administer trackers to people, they have to have a signed piece of paper from a company.
Right.
So, you know, it's all been...
Carefully planned.
Carefully planned.
But didn't he tell the police that you guys were in a relationship and that he didn't trust you, and so that's why the tracker was put onto the car, and then the police kind of dismissed it?
So, and I think that, I mean, he convoluted story that made it, that kind of downplayed it all and made it look like it was some sort of trivial domestic incident.
Yeah.
And possibly that's why the police officers, his complete change of heart when he came back to see me, almost believing the perpetrator and not believing a victim. And when I was told 48 hours later, we're closing this case and we're giving the perpetrator a verbal warning, and he said he won't do it again.
It gets more complicated because the police officer that you initially reported the case to was subsequently convicted of stalking himself.
His sergeant, yes.
You know, ultimately, you kind of think, I wonder, sort of, when that's going on, how these things are ever going to get through, because if it gets through to the...
Absolutely. I mean, it's bound to affect your judgment if you are, in fact, a perpetrator of the same sort of an incident. You're not going to take any allegations of stalking seriously, and you'll dismiss them.
Yeah.
So whatever I would have ever come up with in terms of evidence, I would never have been taken seriously.
You ended up having to hire a solicitor, didn't you, to get some sort of charge brought against your stalker?
Absolutely.
Talk us through that and what the charge was in the end.
Yeah, so I could see that, actually, when I finally got the case reopened by going to a senior member of Lancashire Constabulary, the officers weren't interested to take a statement from me particularly quickly, or Mr James, and closer to the 6 months, there's a 6-month sort of time by which, if you don't charge somebody, you can't charge them at all. And I could see that this was getting closer and closer.
The deadline was coming.
And one of the sergeant who's subsequently been convicted of stalking wrote to me and said, we believe that he's suitable for a caution only.
Which is the lesser.
Well, I mean, also, it's not in the police's gift to make a decision about stalking and harassing cases. It has to be sent to the CPS.
Right.
So I began to realise they're deliberately trying to stop this from getting to the CPS. So with about a week to go, I thought I must hire a solicitor, because every attempt that I was making, and I think I made it worse for myself, the more I was pushing, the more the police were irritated by it, possibly, and pushed it away. And, I mean, in a way, I'm fortunate because I had the means to be able to afford a solicitor, but that shouldn't have to be the case. And some people would have not been able to push to that degree and get a solicitor. But finally, with about a day to go, he was charged, but he was charged with a lower offence. So there are two offences for stalking. One is without fear and distress, and the other is with fear and distress. Although I can never really understand how any stalking case doesn't have an element of fear and distress. But he was charged with a lesser charge, and therefore the case is managed in a different way. It goes to magistrates, and the sentencing possibilities are different. I've subsequently written to the CPS and credit to the CPS as a big organisation for holding their hands up and being honest enough to say they got things wrong, because they have subsequently written to me and said we should have charged him for a 4A.
I mean, you're sitting here so cool and collected, and you're incredibly eloquent when you talk about it, but I can only imagine the amount of fear that you went through and how frightened you were.
You lost your hair?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you see me sitting here today as a much stronger person, but I went through nearly 2 years of a very, very difficult time.
Yeah, sure.
I was completely taken over by fear and anxiety. I mean, I had to take time off work, a career that I very much enjoy and cherish. 18 months I was unable to work and suffered with PTSD. And also, I mean, even though I'm a medical professional, you know, they always talk about the mind-body connection, and I hadn't really understood how much that is real. But within days of this happening, my hair started to fall out, and you know, that added to my lack of confidence, really.
Yeah.
Lancashire Police have given us this statement. We continue to provide support to the victim, and we have worked closely with her in relation to a number of matters raised. We have rolled out refresher training to officers across the force in this area, and we're always striving to improve the service we offer to victims and how we investigate their complaints. All reports will be taken seriously and dealt with robustly. Your reaction to that?
Well, it's certainly not the experience that I had, and you know, it's incumbent upon organisations to not just trot out these party lines which sound good. That actions have to follow these words, and time again, we see evidence that this isn't happening. It certainly actually hasn't happened in my case, but many cases, and I want to recognise Gracie's parents in this.
Yes.
Losing a child is the most horrific situation, and but knowing that due to police lack of diligence and professionalism, Gracie could still be with us today must be most terribly difficult, and my condolences to the family.
Yeah.
Because this can't continue to happen.
No.
It must stop.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And due to brave ladies like you speaking out, hopefully there will be a change. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.